everyone, welcome back. It's certainly been quite a while. I've been busy with life and work, and I just haven't had the time to sit down and film, but here we are today, and we are actually in front of my shelves for once. I didn't think I'd be able to get them cleaned up anytime soon, but a miracle has happened, and we are here. Enjoy my not like very great clean shelves, but yeah, enjoy the change of background for once. Today we are talking sci-fi because I have binged a whole lot of sci-fi through the past month, from Warhammer to Star Wars to murder bots, so let's get into it. Alright. We'll start off with Warhammer, since I did read the most with Warhammer. I read like 3 or 4 books. So we're going to start off with the first one I read, and that is Dead Man Walking by Steve Lyons. This is a Imperial Guard novel about the Krieg taking over a planet that is a tomb world and fighting with Necrons that are coming out of hibernation. This story follows the 2 main characters, one who is the governor's daughter and the other basically her bodyguard. They get split up, and this book follows their 2 different perspectives and views, as well as the views from the Krieg colonel and one of the commissars. I have mixed feelings about this book. I did buddy read this with my husband Michael. He loved it and I had mixed feelings about it. I enjoyed it for the most part, but I feel like the differing perspectives made me not like this book. And look, I've never been a fan of multiple POVs, and that is a well-known stated fact that I mentioned several times. And I think that's my problem with why I didn't like this book, but I don't necessarily think it's the only problem. I think I went into this book with a little bit of a bias. This was advertised when I picked up the audiobook as being a Krieg book. It was supposed to be a Krieg vs. Necrons book is how it was advertised. The cover of the book does state that it's an Imperial Guard novel. This isn't really either. It definitely follows more of the governor's daughter and her companion, and then the battle is what's taking place in the background. It is not the main focus of the book like it is advertised to be, and so I feel like I came into this book with an expectation that wasn't really met. And I kind of feel like the differing POVs of this book, I'll just say that the governor's daughter's companion, his name is Gunther. He is followed through most of the book, and the ending wraps up with his point of view. And the book is basically, it's kind of like his coming to terms with what is happening. And then the story is like a wrap-up of how his character ends up being. And I just didn't like this character. I just couldn't really get behind him because there were so many differing POVs, like I've said, that it felt like his character was underdeveloped. You don't get a lot of time spent with him. So I feel like the build-up to the end, it just didn't really resonate with me because I just feel like I didn't really get to know him as a character. I didn't really care about him as a character. I didn't find his perspective interesting. The governor's daughter, her name is Eric's. A lot of this is also her perspective. And it jumps mainly between the 2. Sometimes it jumps to Commissar Castellan, who was my favorite character. And then from his perspective, they talk about like the Krieg colonel and stuff. And so a big portion of this storyline, to get more context, I know I didn't really explain it very well at the beginning, but it is interesting. Like, there's like a lot of politics behind it. This planet, basically, they're miners. It's a mining planet, and these miners accidentally come across these Necron relics and artifacts that start causing chaos, you know, and the Necrons end up waking up from this, and the planet basically thinks that they can handle it. They think their planetary guard and army is capable of, you know, facing this threat. They don't think the Imperial Guard need to come in, but like a lot of the civilians want the Imperial Guard and stuff to come in, and so they kind of think that the Krieg coming in and decreeing martial law, they see it as kind of like a hostile takeover, and like, so like a lot of the political views and just like the way people view the Krieg in general is very interesting. I really like that aspect of the book, and you definitely get like Gunther's perspective of the book. Since they come and take martial law, they start trying to reorganize their militia and everything, their military. They retrain them to be, you know, Krieg style. They're like, no bonds, you don't get names, your numbers. They, you know, they kind of segregate everyone. You're meant to fight for the Imperium kind of mentality. So that affects Gunther a lot through the book, and you kind of see his transition from being like a lonely soldier on this planet and bodyguard to more of a Krieg mentality, and that does tie in with the end of the book. And that's kind of why I feel like it's underdeveloped, because they don't really elaborate on that aspect, even though it's supposed to play a big part towards the end. And I feel like that's kind of why it felt underdeveloped to me and why I didn't really care. There was also more interesting stuff in this book, like when when it goes to her point of view, there's like how would you say it? There's like a Necron cult. They're like, oh, the God Emperor, he's abandoned us. We have metal gods now. We're gonna follow these guys. And it's a really interesting perspective and view, just for them to find out that the Necrons don't care and they just killed them because, like, ew, human murder. So that was a really interesting perspective, and that's a big chunk of her point of view, is that they get held like captive by these cultists and stuff. And again, it does lead up towards the end. I feel like I can't really go into depth in it without like spoiling it a bit, but it is interesting. Like I said, Commissar Castellan was my favorite character. I feel like his point of view was the most interesting, because he's the one who's interacting with the Krieg the most. And it's kind of funny to see him try to handle the inhumanity of the Krieg, since they're known for being mysterious. You know, they're not very amicable to, you know, socializing with people and stuff like that. So it's really interesting to see his point of view, seeing him try to deal with the Colonel. It's very interesting. It was funny at one point, because he's like, I literally can't handle them anymore. I can't handle the inhumanity. And he's like, I want to transfer. And then they kind of guilt trip him into staying. And they're like, here's our greatest relic. You have to carry it for us. And he's like, well, that's the most human reaction I've ever gotten out of them. So, can't say no to that. So, I don't know. I just really liked his perspective. I think if you just want like a good quick novel to get through, you would definitely like this one. It is a little slow in some parts. I will give it that. Is this the most character driven one? No, But like I said, if you just want a good read and you enjoy Steve Lyon's other books, you'll definitely enjoy this one. So the next book I read is Assassinorium Kingmaker. This is about the, like the title says, the Assassinorium. This was a very cool perspective book. This is basically about the two assassins who are sent out to squash a coup d'etat, basically, on Mars. They're trying to squash a rebellion and an overturning of the Imperium. And this one is pretty different than the usual Warhammer book. This one is a lot more of like political oriented, lots of kind of like spy espionage kind of feel to it, and I really liked this one. I thought it was a really interesting perspective. This one is definitely a more character driven book. There's a lot of exposition and context being put into play at the beginning. A lot of people actually kind of complained about it being slow at the beginning, but I actually really liked it because I feel like it's much needed exposition. It really lays out the characters, what they're like, what each what each type of assassin does, what their skill set is, what they're capable and able to do, and most importantly, how they interact with each other, because that plays like a big impact and role through the book. Like the main two assassins kind of don't get along with each other. They think like one of them, he's not really like the other two are meant for more spy work and espionage. They can like blend in with people, they can change the way they look to mimic a person, while the other one is a sniper and he's meant to just go and shoot people. So they think he's gonna blow their cover and stuff like that, and they're worried that he will, like, you know, ruin the mission and stuff. So that definitely plays a huge part in the storyline down the line. So I really enjoyed that. Like, it is a little slow, but it was definitely necessary because it definitely sets up the characters and then it sets up the plot. And this has a lot of political intrigue in it. Like, it definitely goes into depth about Mars, their houses, their aristocracy. It talks a little bit about like the Mechanicus, and just how like nobody in general on Mars really likes the Imperium or really likes Terra at all. And I think that was kind of funny. There was a part where like one of the noble ladies has a bunch of dogs and she named them after the commissars. Like, one's name was Yarick, one was Creed, and then she literally just named one Ibram Gaunt. Like, and then like the other character's like, oh, you probably shouldn't let the council know about that. They'll probably be offended you named them after dogs. But I thought that was kind of funny. But it's also just really interesting to see like these noble lifestyles in the way they view things. And this also goes into a lot of detail about Imperial Knights, how they work, how they connect with their pilots, and how like people get chosen to pilot them and which houses they belong to, and how they're kind of like passed down through the bloodline and how they run and work. And it's just really interesting. So if you like Imperial Knights and you like the Imperial Knight army, you would definitely love picking this up. There is definitely a lot of action in this. I liked the middle of the book, which was really cool. Basically, the main spy assassin, she gets to pilot one of these, and it's just really cool to like see them fight with these. And I don't know, it's really interesting. The ending, I'm not really sure I liked too much, but the rest of the book was really good. I think it's really interesting, and it's definitely not a perspective you hear like talked about much in the 40k universe. I think there's a couple other Assassinorum books, but you mostly just see like Space Marines, Battlefield type of books. So seeing a more like espionage kind of book put in with like the royalty and aristocracy of Mars, I thought was a really interesting perspective. So if you're a fan of the Assassins, you like spies and espionage with a little bit of action, I definitely think you'd like this book. If you're more into just like shooty, pow, battlefield stuff, then you might not like this one. You might find this one a little bit more boring. However, if you're willing to explore and try something new, I highly recommend picking this one up. The last 40k book I read is The Elemental Cast. This one I also buddy read with Michael. He loved it. I loved it. I actually recommended him to read it because he originally played Tau, and I thought this one was really good because this really went into depth about Tau lore, how their society and everything works. So basically the story for this one is that the Ethereals gather up each cast member. Basically, Tau society is broken into different castes, or caste systems, I should say, that basically oversee different certain types of like their military and their army and their society as a whole. Like fire warriors are like the military and the soldiers, and then some of them are like scientists and stuff like that. So basically they make like a special team of one person from each thing. So they have like a warrior, an ambassador, and engineer, and so they kind of make this special team to go against their foe, and it's just a really good book. Like, it really delves into Tau society, how everything works, even down to the crew. They don't really mention Vespid, which is a little disappointing, but I was actually really surprised that they put in so much detail about the crew, but you really end up liking the crew guy. I found it really interesting that it goes into like their lifespans and their technology, how they'll like kind of deep freeze some of their warriors and stuff. Since they have such short lifespans, they'll put them into like cryo sleep so they can wake them up later to train the new generations and stuff. And it was just really interesting. I highly recommend this one if you're like a fan of the Tau, or if you're new into 40k and you want to just learn more about like the overall lore of the different armies and stuff, then I think this is a really good one to pick up. On to Star Wars. So, I just read The Bad Batch. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Bad Batch. My husband really loved the show though. I got more into it around like the second season when things started getting a little bit more serious with it. I kind of had a hard time getting into it because I didn't like how just stereotypy each character was, but by the second season there was like a lot of good character development stuff, and I got a lot more attached to them in the story. And so when I saw that they had put out a book for it, I was like, oh, I gotta grab that, because if I don't end up liking it, Michael probably will. And I actually did end up enjoying this. This is basically about the Bad Batch crew and of course Omega. This takes place, I think, in between the seasons, because it's not before Tech dies, but after Crosshair betrays everyone. So it's kind of in between that time frame. The overall story is basically they get this mission to pick up this client and her partner, and it turns out she's pregnant and she needs a lift to this planet, and it turns out that there's more to this person than what they initially established. There's basically I don't know how to describe it without like giving away half of the story. I'm not very good at summarizing things, but there's like more to her than meets the eye, and there's more to this baby situation than they initially thought. We'll just put it that way. And I liked this. This is so hard to talk about without spoiling it, because there's so much like going on in this book that's like heavy plot wise that I feel like talking about it just kind of spoils it. But I really ended up liking this one. And usually I'm a little afraid to pick up the books with Star Wars. They're kind of hit and miss. Sometimes it doesn't feel like what the character choices do make sense or anything, but like this one I feel like stayed pretty true to the characters. It actually felt like I was reading like one of the episodes, or like the scripts from one of the episodes. I do feel like the storyline got a little jumbled in the middle, because there are like different perspectives, and like sometimes it goes to one of the characters' pasts, so it gets like a little convoluted, but everything kind of sorts itself out towards the end. I do feel like the end kind of dragged on a little bit, but I was okay with that. My only complaint is that at the end, in like an epilogue part, it introduces a really popular character that I just felt was unnecessarily introduced. Like, unless they play a part, if they decide to put out a next book and they play a part in it, then that would make sense. But like, this is a really big galaxy. There's so many planets and stuff that you can have characters exist in the same timeline and not necessarily have them cross paths with each other. And this need to have like everyone connect with each other, I just find to be frustrating, because I feel like it's so unnecessary. But yeah, I really like this one. I can't really talk about it too much without spoiling it. I'll just say that it does go into a bit about like questions and theories that people have on the show, like when it comes to like clones having families, and like why they have a girl clone like Omega. It doesn't like go like specifically into details on it, but like you can kind of see the link and where they're going with it, so you're kind of like, oh, I see what they're doing there. So I'll just leave it at that. The last and final book I got through is the Murderbots. This is the Murderbot Diaries. I really enjoyed this. This is a very short read. It's like a novella, but it is part of a series. I think there's 8 of them so far, if I remember correctly. This one's very entertaining. This is about a android who's basically made to just kill things. He's like hired for like security and stuff like that. And I like this book because of its unique point of view. This is from the android's point of view. And it's really funny because it's like in a lot of sci-fi and stuff, they're always like dehumanizing the android and stuff, and then people are always arguing like, oh, maybe we need to humanize them and treat them like they're normal. And then in this point of view, the android's just like, no, I'm literally different than a human. Humans are inferior. Quit trying to relate to me, just leave me alone. And I thought that was actually kind of funny, because we assume that they want to be, you know, treated like a human, when in reality he's just like, eh. And it's kind of funny because he's like, I'm not a sex bot, so I don't have like body parts, but he's like, if I did, I would find them boring. So he's just like, it's just funny, you know. He doesn't want to be humanized. He's like, I just want to go and kill things. But it's also funny because he does have like human emotions and feelings, and so it's kind of hard not to relate to him in some ways, because like this science team that hires him, they're like, we gotta go and do this mission, and he's like, oh god, I don't want to do this stuff that's like gonna put me in harm's way and stuff like that, and it's just really good. It's really interesting perspective. I highly recommend this if you want like a short, good sci-fi read to pick up. I do plan on finishing the rest of the series in the future. So let me know what you think of these books. Have you read any of them? Have I turned you on to reading any of them? Let me know your thoughts and comments below. I would love to hear from you guys. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.